The most powerful economy in history just admitted defeat. Not on a battlefield, not in a boardroom, but in a phone call that lasted exactly 47 minutes. On December 15th, 2025, something unprecedented happened. The U.S. Treasury Secretary placed a call to Beijing. Not to negotiate, not to threaten, but to beg. For the first time since World War II, the American empire is on its knees asking its enemies for permission to survive. You think you understand what's happening in the headlines? Trade wars, sanctions, geopolitical chess moves. But you're watching the theater while the real drama unfolds backstage. What you're about to learn will change everything you believe about the global economy. Behind closed doors, 3 separate meetings took place this week that prove the American century is mathematically over. The first meeting was in Washington. The second was in Beijing. The third was in a bunker 200 feet below Riyadh. Each meeting had the same agenda: save the dollar, at any cost. But here's what they discovered in those rooms. The patient is already dead. They're just arguing over who pays for the funeral. I've spent 15 years inside the machinery of international finance. I've watched empires rise and fall from the trading floors of London to the central banks of Asia. What I'm seeing now is not a recession. Not even a depression. It's a liquidation sale. The United States is selling off everything that isn't nailed down to pay a debt that can never be repaid. And the buyers? The very countries Washington spent decades trying to destroy. Let me show you the 3 phone calls that changed history. Call number 1 happened at 3:17 a.m. Eastern Time. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen calling her counterpart in Beijing. The conversation was supposed to last 10 minutes. It went on for 47. Why? Because for the first time in American history, the U.S. was asking China not to attack them economically, but to save them from economic suicide. The United States needs to sell $5.2 trillion in new debt this year. That's not a typo. $5.2 trillion. More than the entire GDP of Japan. Just to keep the government functioning for 12 months. But here's the nightmare. Their biggest customers have stopped buying. China used to absorb hundreds of billions in U.S. Treasury bonds every quarter. Today they're selling, not slowly, not quietly, in massive chunks that make the bond market shudder. Japan, traditionally America's most loyal financial ally, is liquidating U.S. debt faster than they accumulated it. They're not doing this to hurt America. They're doing it to save themselves. Europe? They're broke. Their banks are choking on their own government debt. They can't bail out America when they can't even bail out themselves. So who's left to buy $5.2 trillion in American IOUs? The Federal Reserve. The U.S. Central Bank buying debt from the U.S. Treasury with money printed by the U.S. Bureau of Engraving. This isn't economics. This is a Ponzi scheme with nuclear weapons. And Janet Yellen knows it. That's why she spent 47 minutes begging Beijing not to crash the system that's already crashing itself. But China's response was even more terrifying than the call itself. They said yes, not because they want to save America, but because they want to control the speed of its collapse. Call number 2 happened 6 hours later, this time from Beijing to Riyadh. The Chinese finance minister calling the Saudi crown prince. The conversation was brief. 1 question, 1 answer. The question, are you ready? The answer, we've been ready for 2 years. Ready for what? The end of the petrodollar. For 50 years, every drop of oil sold on planet Earth had to be purchased with US dollars. This created artificial demand for American currency. Even countries that hated America had to stockpile dollars just to buy energy. This was the United States' secret superpower. They could print unlimited money, and the world had to absorb it. They could run infinite deficits, and the world had to finance them. But that was before the sanctions. When Washington froze Russian assets in 2022, they sent a message to every nation on Earth. Your money isn't safe in our system unless you obey our politics. Saudi Arabia heard that message loud and clear. For 2 years, they've been quietly building alternative payment systems, digital currencies that bypass New York entirely, oil contracts denominated in yuan, not dollars. The call from Beijing wasn't a negotiation. It was a confirmation. The infrastructure is ready. The moment the US pushes one sanction too far, the Saudis flip the switch. And when that happens, trillions of dollars currently parked overseas will have no reason to exist. They'll flood back into the American economy like a financial tsunami. The Federal Reserve will face a choice between two kinds of suicide: hyperinflation or economic collapse. Call number 3 was the most desperate of all. 11:30 p.m. Riyadh time. An encrypted call connected the Saudi Finance Ministry to a secure bunker outside Moscow. The conversation lasted 3 minutes. No translator was needed. They were both speaking the same language, mathematics. Russia has something the Saudis need: a battle-tested alternative to the Western financial system. For 3 years, Russia has survived the most comprehensive sanctions in human history. Not just survived, thrived. Their economy is growing, their currency is stable, their trade relationships are expanding. How? They stopped using dollars. Russia built what economists call shadow rails, parallel payment systems, alternative trade networks, bilateral currency swaps that make US sanctions irrelevant. The Saudis aren't just interested in this technology, they want to merge their oil infrastructure with Russia's financial immune system. When that merger is complete, the two largest energy exporters on Earth will be operating outside Washington's control. They'll be selling oil and gas to China and India in currencies that the Federal Reserve can't print or freeze. This is checkmate, but the United States isn't surrendering. They're doubling down. Last week, Congress approved a $200 billion emergency liquidity package. They're calling it infrastructure spending. But read the fine print.